Today I thought it'd be interesting to go through and make a 3D card together. In particular, we're going to make this Pikachu card. I'll probably mostly go into the selecting your layers and cutting them and putting it all together to kind of get a finishing product similar to this situation. The gluing is really what takes the longest, so I don't know if I will go through that today, but that way, if you're interested in making your own 3D card, you know the basic principles and the process of working through it. Let's get started. So basically, when thinking about making any 3D card, you need to make sure that you have at least 4 or more of the same card to work with. Preferably, you would have 5. Working with 4 sometimes can be a bit finicky, or if you make a mistake, then you're kind of out. So we're risking it today with 4. I've chosen this card here that I happen to have 4 of. You can work with any card. It's recommended. I recommend that you don't really start with a shiny card because they are harder to cut and work with. Now, it was saying that I did originally start with the shiny card and it did work out, but I would just say if you want the easiest experience possible, definitely try to work with a card that's not the holographic. Another recommendation I have, if you want a simpler and easier time, I would recommend working with a card design where the Pokemon's attached to the border. So like in this Pikachu card, Pikachu is attached to the bottom of the base here, and that just makes it a little bit easier when cutting out. You can still work around that, but it just makes it a little bit easier to glue on later. You have less small parts flying around. Like in this P-Dove card I'm working on, I don't have the background right now because it's drying, but because I'm really prepared. This P-Dove is kind of, you can see that P-Dove's sitting on a little rock there. So in order to make him 3D above the rock, I had to also cut out this little guy as well to go on top of it. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you want less finicky cutting, I would recommend working with that sort of concept. Those are my kind of 2 things that you need to know. Okay, so other than cards, I would recommend that you have these things in your disposal. You're going to need a cutting mat of some kind, something to cut on so that you don't wreck your desk, a good cutting knife. You're going to need a glue. I just used the Elmer's clear glue. I would recommend probably not using a colored glue or a white glue just in case. And then you also need a marker of some kind. You can also use paint for this, but I just usually use a black or colored marker depending on the background. Alright, so this is the card that we're working with, and basically before you start cutting, you want to make sure that you start your planning process. You want to make sure that every card has a purpose and that you know exactly what you're cutting out on each card. For each 3D card design, there's 2 things that are always going to be for certain. You're always going to have a full background card. If this card's the background card, you will not be cutting this card at all. And you're going to have a shell card. Which what I mean by that is the front is just the shell of the image. This is a different card, but you get what I mean. It's going to be the complete box cut out. And then your other cards are going to be the layers. However, saying that, the cutout here that exists, you can still use that to cut out additional parts. So, and that's what we're going to be doing for this Pikachu card here. Since I only have 4 cards, I kind of have to use that idea as well. Basically, you want to plan out what you're going to be cutting for each card. So I have 4 cards here. So this one's going to be the background. The background card basically will only be showing the skyline of the image. This card here, I'm going to cut out the outline of the buildings. And then the next layer in the image is the road. So we're going to cut out the road here, and that'll be the only thing in this layer. And this will be the front shell where we cut out the whole image. But as well, I'm going to cut out Pikachu and use that as an additional layer on top of that since I don't have a 5th card. If you have a 5th card, I would recommend definitely cutting out Pikachu in its own layer, but this works too. Otherwise, another thing to keep in mind is that you're going to need spacers. So the spacer cards are card cutouts that you're going to use in between each layer to make it look more 3D. And for the most part, with spacers, you're going to be using random other cards that you have. So spacers are basically just more empty card images of cards that you don't really care about. So keep that in mind, that you're gonna also need, depending on the card, probably 5 to 8 spacers, depending on how 3D you want to make it. You can even go more, but for the most part, you don't need 20 cards. Unless you really want to. If you want to cut out 20 spacers and make it a really thick 3D card, go for it. But for my purposes, I think I'm going to do about 6 or 7, maybe 8. We'll see. Like I mentioned before, the background card stays the same, so that's actually already done. So for this first card, like I talked about, we're going to cut out the skyline here. And what I'd recommend too is that you take your time with these. There's no reason to rush. And if you have complicated cuts as well, you can also start cutting it in chunks. You don't need to do one big cut for each one. If you're not planning on saving the background image, which we're not, you might as well. I'm gonna go back in and do a few of the, make sure I have all the edges clean and everything, but basically that's the basic idea. So that way, when you put the background on, the buildings are ahead of the sky. So I'm gonna go and work on some of the details here, just to get minor cuts, and then we'll come back and I'll work on the next layer. Layer 2, and that's it with the background attached. So the next layer is just gonna be this road piece. So I'm going to cut everything off except for the road. So that is basically what we have here. We have these 2 layers, and then we have the road piece there. So next we're going to cut out the front shell. So basically with that, we have the front layer. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut out the Pikachu here. And there we have our Pikachu cut out. Alright, so for the next step, you need to find spacer cards that, like I talked about earlier, and get those ready. I got a few here, and I would recommend picking ones that you know you're not going to use, that you don't care about, that pick some cards that you won't feel bad about cutting. One thing to note though, this Pikachu card is from the Black and White series, and it's relevant because since the X and Y cards, they've pretty much changed the card design. So they went from a basic card that looks like this to a card that looks like this. It's not really a huge difference, but the artwork can be different sizes depending on the generation of card. It's not a big deal. You'll just have to make cutting adjustments depending on which version you're looking at. I also be aware of cards that have the stage 1 evolution in the corner. You're just gonna have to cut around it. Again, not a big deal, just be aware that you don't have that corner marking there. Cutting out spacers is very similar to cutting out the front of the card, just cutting out the whole image. So I'm just gonna do that quick. So once you have all your spacers, to make sure that you have enough, my recommendation is to layer them with your cards. Basically, you're gonna do is put a few in different spots. I might take the background and then put 3 in, and then put the buildings on. And then I might put a couple above that layer, and then put the road on, which then would follow suit with Pikachu. And then I'm gonna put the last 3 on top, and then put the final layer on top. So it'll kind of end up looking, obviously with the additional Pikachu in there, it'll kind of end up looking like this. If you don't like how something looks, feel free to add more spacer cards in there. Before you start gluing though, the next step is to make the layers look like more cohesive and add the shadow effects and everything. That's where the marker comes in. You can do this with paint as well if you want to like get more creative, use different colors. But for the most part, what you want to do is, so you want to go over all these edges too that you cut out, so around the buildings and around every single layer here. And then as well, you want to black out the layers that are going to be behind. So when you put together your 3D card, you want to cover things that are going to show up in the background when you look at it from the angle. So for example, on this back card, you'll want to cover all the buildings and Pikachu so that when you put the buildings behind it, those are the first appearance of the buildings. So that's what we're going to do next. So with that, in the end process, when it's all glued together, we should end up with something like this, which I feel like turned out really well. So the next stage is the gluing stage. So you want to make sure to have a bottle of some kind of glue. Again, I'd recommend the clear stuff. You're also going to want to make sure that you have something to put pressure on the cards when they're drying so that they remain flat. What I found too is that if you get like a piece of parchment paper to wrap it in while it's drying, then if glue does come out of the sides, which sometimes it does if you put too much on, you won't get that all over whatever you are using for your weight. So the gluing process does take a while. I would glue 2 together, let it dry, glue another couple together, let it dry. So yeah, I'll document the first few glues and then I'll do the rest off camera and then I'll show you the final result. Like so. Then I'll usually wrap it in parchment, stick it underneath something, and then get a weight, or in this case Pokemon cards, and stick it on top. It's been quite a few hours and I have been gluing this card together and I feel like it's turned out well. I'm gonna, after I'm done filming this, I'm gonna actually let it sit underneath the weight again like I was doing in the in-between process, probably overnight, just so all the glue settles and everything, because some of the glue isn't dry yet and I want to just make sure that it's all together. But anyway, you want to see the finished result, so that is that there. There is some glue on the Pikachu I'm going to clean up, but once it dries you'll be able to scrape that away. I overestimated the amount of glue it would take to get him to stick, but I feel like it turned out really well. Pretty good anyway for a 24-hour 3D Pokemon card. Again, like, feel free to take your time with these. I feel like the more time that you spend on these projects, the better they kind of turn out. And besides, they're supposed to be a fun, relaxing project, not something super stressful, so don't feel like you need to rush. But yeah, so that is the finished product. If you make any 3D cards, I would love to see them, so the best way would probably be to tweet them at me. I'll leave my handle here. So if you like this video, let me know. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below and I'll answer them. If you want to see another tutorial video of some sort or more videos about this topic, let me know as well. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe, and I'll be back with another video hopefully soon. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy making your 3D card.